Thank you for joining us for The Drive Back, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which is to talk about it on the ride home. My name is Garrett, and of course I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Adrian.
Howdy there.
And today, we're going to be reviewing the latest HBO Max release from Warner Brothers, The Little Things. So our review and more coming up on The Drive Back. The Little Things is directed by John Lee Hancock and stars Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, and Jared Leto. An ex-city cop returns to Los Angeles on an assignment, but ends up staying when the detective who took over his position is dealing with a case that bears striking similarities to another case he worked years before. So this movie comes to us from the director John Lee Hancock, who's given us a pretty enjoyable movie with Saving Mr. Banks, and also movies like Snow White and the Huntsman. So kind of a mixed career at best.
Yeah.
I will start out. What did you think about this movie? Any general thoughts before we go over some spoilers?
Yeah, spoiler free, I guess, kind of as always. I did not see the trailer for this film. I think I watched it with my girlfriend and her dad over the weekend. And I remember saying right before it started, I said, you could place money on me. I have no idea what this movie's about. And it getting started, I could kind of tell that it was like an investigative movie, like a detective film. But as it unraveled, I mean, it definitely had me questioning without giving any spoilers. I was definitely into the plot line. I think there were definitely some misses and definitely some big home runs that I thought. I'll talk about that as we talk about characters and acting and all that. But yeah, I mean, I guess no spoilers. I would just say that I liked it.
Yeah, it has its positives. I would say for me personally, the negatives outweigh it a little bit. On the whole, without any kind of spoilers, I would say that this movie is pretty meh, pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
Without spoiling anything, we're not at that point yet. This is a plot we've seen thousands of times.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's literally a recycled movie plot. Apparently, this was written 30 years ago by John Lee Hancock.
That makes sense, actually, just based off how the movie came out.
Because a lot of people have been comparing this to Seven. And you can really see some of the similarities there, even though the chemistry isn't really there, but we'll get there when we talk about spoilers. Speaking of spoilers, let's go ahead and let's drop a spoiler warning. We're going to be spoiling The Little Things. But real quick, The Little Things is available to watch on HBO Max as a part of its in-theaters and streaming co-release schedule. As of January 30th, I believe was when it came out. It's available it's available till the end of February. So you have until February 28th to watch this film. Now, let's talk this movie. There's some of the more spoiling things about it. What's going on the top of your head right now? What's
I'm going to start out with a positive. I do agree with you that this movie, I don't think it was bad, but it left little impression on me. I liked it while watching it. But after viewing and after talking about it a little bit, I will forget this movie. And that's just an unfortunate thing to say. It's not going to stick with me. I'm not going to be talking about this in a film discussion in 10 years. It's definitely one of those, it came and it's going to go movies. But to start off with a more of a positive, I thought Jared Leto did a fantastic job in his character.
Yes, Jared Leto is fantastic in this movie, but he's just that kind of character. And
always is, yeah.
He's that slimy, maybe homeless looking kind of guy, who's gonna be great. I'm interested to see him in Morbius. Hopefully, he's a little bit different. But it was definitely a typecast. I'll say that.
Sure, I do think that he embodied the character really well, though. I know he's a big method actor, and even though I knew it was Jared Leto, he looked the part, which is of course credit to the makeup and the costuming department and all that. But I just felt like, again, like you said, maybe it's just who he is. But I mean, I love him in 30 Seconds to Mars, his band. So I know he's like a very loving person in real life. So the
Yeah.
fact that he's able to get to these darker places for these films is kind of inspiring to me. It is really, really impressive.
Yeah, it's the problem with it for me is that and kind of piggybacking on this in the acting department across the board, the acting from the main three is good. I don't want to say it's very good because like the issue is that these all these actors, Denzel, Rami, and Jared, are all fantastic on their own. They're
Of
all
course.
Oscar-winning actors who are put into these roles. The problem is I don't feel like they're given enough room to really expand on those characters because there's nothing for those characters really there.
Yeah.
Like I was really looking forward to Rami Malek going like in the same scenes as Jared Leto and Denzel Washington, but his character was the most flat. It had no growth whatsoever except for his you know dealing with what happens at the very end. But even
Yeah, I
then,
think
it's like he's just sitting there, like just completely stone faced for like the last 5 minutes of the
I
movie.
think that might just be his face as well. But something that so I always picture movies, and there's certain movies that do this really, really well to me, and there's movies that do this not so well. And that is like there's films that just jump into people's lives at a certain point with no forestory, no backstory, nothing, and then they leave at a certain point, and all you get is that little tiny glimpse in their life. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an example of this done, where you jump in, you watch something happen, and then you jump out, and that's it. There is no like massive arc really.
Yeah,
Um, and this movie, I could. It's like they tried to do that, where you jump into this detective's life, and then they don't really tell you much, and they kind of try to like build on it. But again, everything is so surface level, and nothing really happens of consequence until the very, very end of the film. So I didn't feel invested for the majority of the movie in terms of like you said, the characters. Like Denzel Washington had this big thing going on that I didn't know about, and they kept alluding to it for the whole film, but I didn't care because I didn't know what happened, and they didn't make it. It didn't weigh anything.
yeah, it's very kind of weird. It's like this movie starts strong with a very very good cold
Very.
open, and once he gets past that, it is I would say it's pretty interesting for at least the first 45 minutes to the first hour, and then it started to lose me in terms of its interest level. It was like going downhill almost in terms of what I actually thought of what was happening. And speaking of the trailer and kind of knowing this was about going in, I was expecting a completely different ending to this
Mm.
based on the trailer. So the trailer frames it in such a way that you think Denzel Washington is going to end up being the actual killer.
That was. I mean, I think that's kind of like supposed to make you question at the end.
Yes, and that's what I was expecting the whole movie. So I felt a little disappointed. I think that would have made this movie stand out over.
Yeah, have that plot twist at the end.
Yeah, except this, what we got instead was incredibly formulaic, and it was weird because like it doesn't feel like there's any resolution. It's a part that nagged me about this movie is, and this is a full spoiler. They get Jared Leto takes Rami Malek to that desert ditch or whatever, and just for the pure sake of him being a crime fan, as far as we know, he's completely innocent.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's like a lot of little things of evidence, but they're all coincidental. There's nothing of hard evidence.
Exactly. So he just takes him out there for no reason. It's a very confusing character choice, in my opinion, and just starts making him dig around. And I mean, I guess he was trying to make some sort of point when he's like, we could just leave right now if you believe me and you know that I'm telling the truth. And then he just keeps digging because he's so intent on finding the killer that he can't see that this person most likely didn't do it. And then kills Jared Leto which I don't think a single shovel hit to the head like that would kill
Depends on
you.
the angle of the shovel.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a cut. It was like a I don't know. I'm being semantic on that part, but they
I don't
kill,
know.
he dies, supposedly, and then there's no consequence at all. They don't talk about like any like departmental investigation into it. Why Rami Malek was missing. I think his wife would probably call the department and be like, he didn't come home last night, and that would, I don't know. It just felt like you really have to suspend your belief or your disbelief for like the last 45 minutes of this movie.
I'm going to have to fundamentally disagree on suspending belief. I think he's a detective. So I think him staying out late is probably fairly easily justifiable. And also, he was out casing the house with Denzel Washington. So he's probably already told his wife he's going to be out late. And that whole last 45 minutes transpires overnight. And Denzel Washington says, tomorrow when you go into work, you're going to tell them that Jared Leto didn't pan out and that you're going to move your investigation onto someone else. Like, that's all pretty standard stuff. Literally, you could write probably one sentence on why, just alibi Jared Leto's character, and then they wouldn't even investigate it. It'd be like, oh, okay, then he wasn't the killer.
But I feel like, again, if he was a suspect, they never cleared him, right? But they never gave evidence either. I don't know how policing or detective work goes, but as far as I understand it, he's still a suspect. And until...
But that's why when he goes to work the next day, Rami Malek can just write like, oh, he was able to alibi where he was during the time that we suspect the murder. It couldn't have been him. He's not our person. And also, it was also during a time when the FBI transitioned and the FBI was taking over the case. So they just said, we're going to, like, anyone who was your suspect is not even in question anymore.
Which that felt incredibly convenient. Like, oh, you did all this hard work. We're going to throw it out. We're not even going to look at the guy you had before.
But I think that's because Rami Malek wrote him out as a suspect that next morning. I personally feel like they explained it. I mean, I definitely didn't think that was an issue. But I will agree with you that I think, or maybe I guess elaborate on something that you said. I do think that this film was more of a study on how you can get blinders on when you're so invested in something that, like, it is nothing, it can't be anybody but this person. And you even get to that point as the audience. You're like, there's no hard evidence, but how can it not be? Like, look how weird this guy is.
Yeah.
Look at, like, why does he have this? There's, like, enough circumstantial stuff that even you watching are like, it's totally him. Like, there's no way.
Which that plays on our own biases, obviously. We see the weirdo,
Totally.
The outcast in society. We're going to think that they're, the one that'll commit that atrocity, but usually it's not.
And then you also think, though, that, like, watching the movie, you expect, oh, we're going to get the reveal that he is the killer or he's not. Like, that's what's going to happen. It's going to boil over. And the movie leads you not knowing. And I think that's super, obviously, intentional. I think it could have been done a little better, but I think it was good in the fact that you don't know. And it was more about how, like, again, Denzel Washington's character at the end sends over, huge spoiler, the little thing, just so that Rami Malek can sleep better at night thinking that it was.
Which I want to talk about that, because that feels like a very weird decision and a borderline unhealthy one, that you would perpetuate a lie like that, to, because now he has to go back to that girl's parents and say, oh, we found, because that you don't have no idea where she is. And he's going to go back to those parents and say, oh, we found this. Time to assume the worst happened and she's dead because of Jared Leto's character. When in fact she could be kidnapped. She could be out there somewhere.
But he wouldn't say that she was killed by Jared Leto's character because Jared Leto's character moved towns.
What I'm saying is, he would automatically assume that she was dead when she may not be. They never explained what happened to her.
That's fair, but I don't think that he would just acknowledge. Like, I don't think he's going to give that thing back to the parents. I think
we'll never know.
Because if he gave that to the parents, they'd be like, well, if you have this, like, where'd you find it? And then he would have to go to the department, and the lie would get so much bigger. I think that was just for him personally to know that it was the right person, even though we don't know that it was the right person or not.
Yeah. It feels very convenient. The entire thing feels very convenient. And
I'll give you that.
And then the perpetuation of this lie, this unhealthy behavior. Like, you can see through Rami Malek's desperation in the digging scene. He's so desperate to make this guy the bad guy.
Yeah.
That rewarding that behavior just feels wrong to me. But
That's fair,
I
but
guess
it
that's
may
just
have been the
personal.
bad guy.
But they don't. That's the thing. They don't tell you. And
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 I think it would have been better had we seen. So the big spoiler at the end: Denzel Washington sends the red hair thing
mhm.
to Rami Malek's character. I think it would have been better had we seen Denzel Washington's character walking through a convenience store and seen the red things on the counter, like that he could purchase them, but we don't see him buy them. And then he still sends it, and that would leave us wondering: did he buy it or did he have it?
Yeah.
Like I think they could have made the. I think the ending. This is such a weird thing to say, but I don't think it was ambiguous enough. I think that for what they had set up, it needed to be more of like a open ended. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like who did what? And they
Hmm.
kind of led you down a path that just made, like you said, it made it seem wrong. So
Yeah.
I think they made a mistake there at the very end and kind of honing in that it's not Denzel Washington for the most part, probably. It was a weird ending.
It is weird, and again, it's a product of losing interest like halfway through. Um, but just a couple other things that I wanted to talk about. So as far as two or actually three good things about this movie, it has great production design.
Yeah,
I mean, this feels like '90s LA, except for the trivia I saw today that all the streetlights were using LED instead of the original orange yellow lights from the
nice.
'90s. So that was interesting. But also the cinematography in this movie is very good. There are a couple of wonky edit moments, but there's also some really good editing moments as well. And then but I mean, this leads me to other negatives for this movie, real quick. I mean, we talked about the plot being recycled and kind of feeling like a tribute to movies like Seven or I even got a couple pieces of Zodiac in here,
Yeah, I'd
um,
agree.
and not in the best way. I would say it's kind of a little bit more rip-offy in some instances. Um, but there's two things that also stood out to me real quick as well. That the score for this movie, I've seen a couple other reviewers talk about how it was good in setting the tone.
Hmm.
This score felt very basic,
Hmm.
and it's by Thomas Newman, who I haven't seen other projects with his work in it, so I don't know specifically if this is like a part of a larger body of work. But it sounded very basic. I almost thought it was like a film school student's work because it was like the same
Hmm.
theme played like 4 or 5 times, and I just didn't notice it. But also, there's no real chemistry between Rami Malek and Denzel Washington. Like they're like you can tell that they're working together because they're doing the movie together, but the characters didn't feel like there was any like real connection. If that makes sense. I don't. Did you pick up on that?
I'm wondering why there should be, because they're two from two different counties.
Well,
Um,
because Rami Malek took over the position from Denzel Washington when he left.
they didn't know each other.
No, but like there's still that connection there, right? Like they're supposed to be. Like they're supposed to be coming. Like he doesn't know who he
Hmm.
is. He comes in. They start working together, and they by the end of the movie they build a big enough bond that he gives the guy a hug, and he's like, "You'll be fine" or whatever. But it doesn't feel earned to
I
me.
don't know if there's a bond at the end. I think it's just they're just working the case and something goes wrong. But
Ah,
so I didn't notice the score thing either. And I don't know. One of my things is if the score really stands out, it's probably really good or really bad. But if it just
mm-hmm.
kind of blends in, I've said this before that my standpoint is that if it fits the movie, if I'm not like coherently noticing it all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it was okay. I could not tell you a single musical note from this movie. In fact, I probably thought there was none. So I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest. Um, but yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying about no chemistry because I agree that there was none, 100%. I think that they literally were like two people in a
Mm-hmm.
car solving a case. My, I guess, devil's advocate argument would be that isn't that what they were? Is
I
just two
mean,
people solving a case that I mean, he didn't. They don't care for each other. The only reason that Rami Malek invited him onto the case is because he's worked something similar before.
yeah. But then you get like weird moments where Rami Malek's like, "Oh, let's go get breakfast." Like at like 5 minutes after meeting him. I don't know. It starts out like, "Oh, you parked it behind my car. I don't have time for it. I need it towed." to then like later that day being like, oh, let's go get breakfast, and then even later on, it just feels like rushed and
I'll
not
give you
natural.
that. I forgot about that whole car thing because it immediately made Rami Malek out to be like this
Like a douchebag.
douchebag. Yeah, like immediately I was like, okay, he's like a go-getter, career guy. Like that's his whole job. And then
Yeah.
immediately he was kind of a lot more nice than I thought. Like for example, even when Denzel Washington and his friend are at the I don't know, like a bar or something, like a diner,
Yeah.
and Rami Malek comes in and is talking to his coworker, and they're like talking, and then I thought that was like a passive aggressive conversation in the very beginning. So I was like, oh, Rami Malek is this douchebag. He's like trying to be angry at Denzel Washington, and then he's really nice. So I will give you that flip was odd. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like I think totally what we're talking about though is this whole movie boils down to like, I just don't really know. Like I just like it was okay,
I
I
mean,
guess.
you kind of shift back and forth, you know. But one thing I do want to note before we kind of move on, because I mean I don't really have anything else that I brought up in my notes here. I'm very interested to see if this was actually filmed last year. If it was
Totally, I think.
if it was filmed during COVID, because there's a lot of sequences where it's just two people, maybe three, and you
Yeah.
don't see like big crowds of people. You don't see a lot of people in a restaurant or something like that. I mean, there's
Yeah,
that one bar sequence, but
shots really of anything.
yeah,
They're all like inside a building or inside a car. Oh, actually, like totally. Even more to your point, when they're sitting outside Jared Leto's apartment, no one else lives there,
yeah.
like at all.
Like LA felt incredibly empty, and
They totally must have, yeah.
yeah, which I mean, interested to find that out. Maybe it was filmed in 2019. It may have been delayed because of COVID, but I'm very interested to see kind of outside of this movies that are filmed right now, whether or not they're going to feel isolated and lonely, kind of like this did.
I think this movie's budget was a little lower. I think a lot of movies that need to be
True.
bigger will use a lot of CGI to fill that in, like background characters, especially because we're getting so good with it now.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room to fill that in. I do want to say something that I think could have made this movie a lot more interesting to me.
Sure.
Is the name of this movie was The Little Things, and they reference it a couple times that it's the little things that'll get you caught, and it's the little things that'll help you get away.
Yeah.
Cool, really cool premise to me. Like I love that idea. I love crime podcasts. I love all that stuff. And for a crime buff like Jared Leto, who like honestly tried to confess to a crime previously because he just knows about it so much, I wanted to see this movie enter like a mind game scenario of Jared Leto knowing crime so well that he's able to toy with the police officers, and he kind of does it. But
Yeah.
I'm talking like I wanted to see like a whole mind game play out of like I know where you're gonna be, I know who you are, I know all the stuff about you, and maybe like even reveal Denzel Washington's secret. Like maybe he knows it somehow. Like I wanted more.
Yeah. For a movie billed as a psychological thriller, it's not.
I wasn't thrilled at all.
I mean, it wasn't psychological at all. It was just here's a creepy guy, here's a cop with some issues related to a past case, and a guy who's trying to be his best. That's it. That's the depth of this psychological lake.
Well, I think they tried to again. I think they tried to play onto that whole like, oh, psychologically, like you zone in on someone and you get like the horse blinders on and you can't see anything but what you want to see.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, that's a good premise, but that should be the foundation of your film, not the whole point of your film.
Yeah.
You need to add a ton of stuff on top of that to make it engaging.
Yeah. This movie kind of boils down to 2 points. Number one, this would have been a fantastic movie back in the 90s. Without.
Wait, when did you say it was written?
It was written in the 90s. So,
oh, okay. Perfect.
Yeah, like Steven Spielberg and Danny DeVito and someone else were originally like people that were slated to direct this, and everyone kind of ended up passing on it. Which I mean, maybe it could have been a better movie back in the 90s. But number two, the script I feel like is not strong enough where they're going into this production with a mediocre script, and that's why you get Denzel, Rami, and Jared is to try and make it better. And I don't think it worked 100%.
No, I think it definitely brought some points. Like I thought all the acting was serviceable and if not good from Jared Leto's part. I tend to like him in like Mr. Nobody and Dallas Buyers Club. I didn't really like him as the Joker, like most people.
Yeah.
But I appreciate his effort. Like he is one of those 0 to 100 people. One of the reasons I wanted to watch this film is because he was in it. I kind of just support him, I guess, and what he does. I just always find it interesting. And yeah, I mean, it was all just okay.
Yeah. Apparently, he actually drove Denzel Washington crazy with his method acting.
That's well, didn't for Joker he like send dead animals to his RV mates?
You gotta slow it down, Jared. But
And
anything else?
apparently, for to talk about him for Suicide Squad, apparently, like most of his role was cut from the film,
Yeah.
which is why it seems so crazy and like impromptu and spontaneous. That's because his whole arc was removed from the film.
Yeah. Apparently, he's gonna be in the Snyder Cut, so we'll see. Hopefully,
Really?
hopefully he isn't looking like a 2-bit gangster and actually looks like the Joker. But anything else you want to add before we kind of get into some final thoughts and scores here? I feel like there's not a lot else to talk about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sure. So as far as kind of my overall thoughts leading into my score here, I would say The Little Things tries to stay afloat with its cast and its beautiful cinematography, but I feel like its recycled plot, its uninteresting mystery, and the fact that there's no real chemistry between the two main leads, it makes it ultimately forgettable. I'm gonna forget I watched this tomorrow.
Oh no, you should get that checked out.
But I ended up giving it a 44. I mean, it's
wow.
not all bad, and I'd like to stress this: a 44 is not a horrible score. It's forgettable, and I think that's the biggest sin that's going against it.
Yeah, totally.
But what about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. My scores are all over the place, I know, and that's because haven't committed to a certain scale, I guess, in my head. I just rate movies based off of like I watch them and I'm like, this is the score that I think this movie is. And I don't know if that even means anything at this point, but you know what? I still give scores. So I gave this movie a 34.
Okay.
After finishing it, that was kind of like the first number that popped into my head. It was like 30 to 40, and I was like, those are both good numbers, 34. It just, yeah, like I just don't care really, and I won't forget tomorrow, but like I will talk about this movie if someone wants to, but I guarantee you, I would almost bet that no one is going to ask me about this film.
Yeah. Like I will say, if you have HBO Max and you're looking for something to watch, there are people out there who will like this movie. There are people who will think it's a very intriguing mystery and it's original and different. And props to you. Go out and enjoy it. Like, it's available till February 28th. But in our eyes, it just wasn't as engaging as I think it was set out to be. In that trailer, I was so excited for this movie after that trailer, and kind of a little disappointed.
I will say something I was really excited about after watching it is this to me was kind of, besides Wonder Woman, the first of like the 2021 big budget films viewable at home.
Yes.
This was kind of like that beginning of like, oh, now because this was on the Warner Bros. Slate, right, of movies that we're going to get on HBO Max, the first one. So to me, while it might not have been the best film, I'm certainly excited about what's to come because it's nice to see a not Netflix movie.
Yes.
At home. Like, it's really nice to know that this was a full production, whether it was during COVID or not, but it was like a big deal. And this is a movie that we get to watch home. So I am excited for what this movie hints at for the remainder of the year, for sure.
Yeah, and then we're also both looking forward to Judas and the Black Messiah, which comes out in 2 weeks from the recording date.
Yep.
So we'll be gearing up to do that.
If you're listening to it now.
Or sometime soon. Yeah. But to wrap this up, Adrian, there's something tickling at the back of my brain. Isn't there something we always like to say?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I do have something else that I want to say, though. That's just go watch a movie. Go ahead and watch whatever you need to. I don't know. This is probably one that I would personally tell you to pass on. I think you would say the same, Garrett.
I would say there are people who will enjoy it. I mean, give it a shot.
I think there's better things to watch even on HBO Max. If you're looking to like support Jared Leto or Denzel Washington or Rami Malek, it's cool to see them in a movie. As always, they've definitely got the star power. I just don't think that star power was enough to weather the ship that was this film. So there's a lot of movies out there. Just go watch one. Go watch something. Go talk to your friends about it. Or even just watch it for yourself and learn something.
Absolutely. So thank you for watching or listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.